Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Ironman Conquer the Course Indian Wells webinar. My name is Juliette Hockman. I am a coach at Life Sport Coaching, and I'm delighted to be joined here by my colleague, Jeff Sankoff, and our race director, Ryan. The way this works today is that Jeff will give a presentation. He's raced 70.3 Indian Wells a number of times. As well as coached countless athletes on that course. So he's going to give you a really great behind the scenes preview as to swim, bike, and run and all the logistics surrounding race day. If you have questions throughout the course of the presentation, just put them in the Q&A section, and Ryan and I will be addressing those questions as Jeff talks, as Jeff gives his presentation. We'll also have some opportunity at the end to bring people forward and to answer questions as well. Jeff Sankoff is a seasoned athlete himself. He's done probably 70.3s, as well as a number of Ironmans. He's been to Kona and the World Championships for 70.3. He's also the Tri-Doc, runs a fantastic podcast, which is an amazing combination of answering health-related questions that have to do with triathlon, as well as interviewing guests. He writes for Triathlon Magazine. He writes for Training Peaks. And he also coaches athletes privately and is part of our Tri-Club program at Life Sport. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Jeff. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks, Juliette. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And can you see that okay? Hope so.
Yep, we can see that.
Awesome. So thanks for that introduction, Juliette. It is really a pleasure for me to be here to talk about this race, a race that I have done 3 different times, a race that I've coached several athletes through. My most recent time doing this was last year. So I have a great deal of familiarity with this course, and I feel like I'm really well positioned to tell you all about it, answer any questions you might have that come up along the way, and we will have a good time getting to learn about the Indian Wells, look into 70.3 altogether. And just to kind of back up what Juliette was saying, just a little bit about who I am to be talking to you. I have been a triathlete for over 2 decades. I started, like many, as an adult onset swimmer, back of the pack racer, eventually found myself in the middle of the pack, and after a very long time, finally got to the pointy end. I have now qualified for the 70.3 World Championship 7 times. I've been to Kona a couple of times. And in my day job, I'm an emergency physician. And I've used my medical career and my love for triathlon to help give back to that community by providing medical content for Triathlete Magazine, for Training Peaks, and now for Fast Talk Labs, which has traditionally been a cycling website, but is expanding into triathlon. And I am working with them on both their podcast as well as their website. For the last 5 years, I have been an Ironman University and USA Triathlon certified coach, and have worked with my colleague Juliette and our boss, Lance Watson, with a number of athletes here in North America and around the world. And as Juliette mentioned, for the last 5 years, I've been producing the Tri-Doc podcast, a podcast that brings together health and wellness topics with interviews of people from around the world of multisport. I hope that you'll consider giving that a listen. You can find that wherever you find your podcasting content, and you can have a listen on the next run you're on. I have given a few of these Ironman webinars now on Conquer the Course for various races, and so I'm a little bit of a veteran at this point. Hopefully this will go smoothly, as some of the other ones have as well. I like to begin these webinars talking about why you are so fortunate to be doing this race. And I came up with 5 reasons. It was not hard to find 5 reasons. This is a really terrific late season race. It is a wonderful way to finish off your triathlon racing season. Many who come to do this race are coming from colder climates, and so it's really nice to get a weekend in December where you're in a nice warm desert environment and getting to ride your bike outside, maybe for the last time before you have to go down into the pain cave for the rest of the winter. Some, of course, are living in California and they won't have to stop riding all winter, but for the rest of us, this is a really great event to do late in the season. It's in a beautiful location. The weather, as I mentioned, is always nice. race. The bike course is rolling, it's scenic, it's not particularly difficult, and part of the bike course includes a racetrack experience, which to my knowledge is the only one that you are going to encounter on any of the Ironman 70.3 or full distance race courses. So that is a pretty cool benefit and something that I will touch on when I get to the bike course. And you finish it all off with a run course that is challenging to be sure, but very scenic and very enjoyable. So before I get too far into the race itself, let me first give you a little bit of the lay of the land. This is an overview of the La Quinta area, La Quinta and Indian Wells. Up here to the far left is where the tennis center is. That's where the sign-in, where you register to get your race packet. It's where T2 is located, and it's where the finish line for the race is located. Down here at the bottom of the map, and I'm going to butcher this. I've been trying to get this name right for the last couple of hours, but I believe it is Lake Kawia. That is where the swim takes place. And you'll notice that there is a reasonable distance between these two places. And so logistically, this 70.3 event requires you to get gear to two different transitions. And I will address that as we move through this presentation so that it's a little clearer how that is done. If you're wondering exactly where this area is, for those of you who have never been before, Los Angeles can be found 123 miles to the west over the mountain range that is in between the two areas. And San Diego, coincidentally, is also 123 miles away to the southeast. If you're flying into the area, as I did from Denver, there is an airport, the Palm Springs Airport, which is very accessible via several major airlines and is pretty neat because it's an outdoor airport, which is kind of cool for me living in Denver, where it's a massive indoor airport. It's the one of the few outdoor airports I've been to. Now, just in case anybody is here for the other event that takes place in this area in the Coachella Valley that is a little bit off to the east, I don't want to scare you off, but this is not the appropriate webinar. This webinar is about a bunch of people dressed very differently who are going to be doing a different kind of a pursuit outdoors, and also the Coachella Festival takes place at a different time of the year. However, if you're here for any kind of interest in Coachella, please do stick around and maybe I can convince you to consider a triathlon in the future. I want to zero in on the Indian Wells Tennis Center because this is where you will spend a bulk of your time kind of leading up to the race. And the reason for this is because this is where the Ironman Village can be found. You will note that there is a large avenue here. Hang on, I'm just going to draw. Do that. You'll note that this is Miles Avenue, and this runs east-west on the south boundary of the tennis center. And there is a large open field that is used for parking that is very easy to get into. This is where you will park when you come to get your athlete packet, but it's also where you're going to park on race morning. So the folks at Indian Wells have this done, have this really dialed in. It's really easy to do. So when you come to do your registration and pick up your packet, it's very easy because you're going to be coming over. All the athletes come over a course of a couple of days, so parking here is very easy. But you will get yourself oriented to the fact that when you arrive on race morning, there is a very nicely streamlined entrance into this parking area. It accommodates all of the vehicles of all of the racers. And then there are shuttle buses that will be parked along Miles Avenue just outside of the parking area. And those shuttle buses will transport you over to Lake Kawia, the recreational area where the swim takes place. So that's a little bit of the logistics of race morning. So again, when you come to pick up your race packet, I'm just going to park in this field and cross the street and go into the tennis center. But on race morning, there will be shuttle buses, very obvious, lined up along this street. And you'll grab those shuttles in order to get to the swim. The rest of the area in the, out of my pen here. Let's see, how do I get out of my pen? The rest of the area here, you have the finish line, which is where you're going to be endeavoring to get to for your entire weekend. And the other thing I want to note is T2. So there's a large open field here, which is where the second transition is. And this is, as I mentioned, a 2 transition race. So on the Thursday or the Friday when you arrive for this race, and people always ask me, when should I show up for one of these events? For a Sunday afternoon, sorry, for a Sunday morning race, the latest I would advise people to show up is probably Friday afternoon. That's kind of the best way to do things because Friday afternoon is gives you enough time to check out your bike, to make sure you haven't forgotten anything, to be able to replace anything that you might need, because there is a couple of different stores within the Ironman Village where you'll be able to replace things or pick up things that you don't have with you, get your bike serviced if necessary. So Friday afternoon is generally what I recommend. And then on Saturday, you're going to have to do a couple of things that are really important. First, you're going to have to get your wetsuit and your bike over to Transition 1, which is located at Lake Kaiwea, and I'm going to show you that coming up in a couple of slides. But the second thing you'll need to do is drop your run gear in a red bag in the T2 area. And that is done on Saturday, the day before the race. So it's good to get there on Friday, get your packet, get all of these bags and stickers, which you will then be able to get all your gear into and be ready to go on Saturday morning. There is another thing I want to point out about the Indian Wells Tennis Center, and that is this nice loop of concrete, which is I want to say it's about 1.5 football fields long. It's a very wide, open sort of pavement loop that goes around here. And the last 2 times that I raced, when I showed up in Indian Wells the first time, I found getting out to do kind of a easy kind of warm up bike ride just to check my bike and everything else. I found it a little bit difficult in Indian Wells just because there's a lot of wide boulevards with a lot of traffic and not a ton of places that I could ride safely and feel comfortable. This loop that's within the Indian Wells Center is a really good place to go and do a warm up or just a checkout ride for your bike. And as you can see, it's fairly proximate to where the Ironman Village is. It's very wide pavement, and even though there are these 90-degree turns, because it's so wide, you can actually just be riding an arrow. You're not going to be blistering through at 30 miles an hour or anything, but you can easily ride an arrow around these corners and just do a few loops just to check out your bike, run through the gears, check out your brakes and things like that. It tends to get a lot of other bikers that come around and do it as well, but it was always a really great place to go on the Friday or Saturday just to check things out, make sure your bike was working, and feel completely safe because there were no cars on this road and nobody there to risk any collisions or anything like that. So something to consider. We're going to talk about the run and the bike a little bit later on, but just to sort of, again, give you a little bit of the lay of the land, you come into Transition 2 when you're finished the bike through here. You're going to exit through the top here, and the run course is actually going to take you around the top of the Indian Wells Center and then down this stretch of road before you get onto Miles and head west. And we will talk about this much more when we get to the run course, but since we're on the map, I figured I would show you how the flow works on race day. This is an overhead shot of T2, and you can see that this is on the Saturday. This is late on the Saturday, so most racers have dropped off their run gear. And what the race organizers ask you to do is to take your run gear, which is going to include your running shoes, your race belt with your number, any nutrition that you want for the run, as well as maybe glasses, a hat, whatever you need for the run segment. You're going to put it into this red bag, and they ask you to tie the red bag to the rack at your spot. And many people do that. Some people still put them on the ground, as you could see. That is fine. I mean, you can do it either way, but it's probably a little bit safer to secure your bag to the rack. Just do it in a way that's very easy to untie. So then when you get to transition after the bike, you put your bike, you quickly just pull the string to untie that bag, get it down, and you're good to go. I will get back to T2 once we talk about the bike course. But let's move on to the swim area, and I will break, I promise, for questions very shortly. So this is the Lake Kauai recreation area, and this is Lake Kauai itself. The I mentioned earlier that it's mandatory to check in both your bike and your wetsuit on Saturday. And the reason for that is because Lake Kauai is a protected water resource. And there has been problems with invasive species of mollusks, and they are very, very concerned about not introducing any other species going forward. And having 2,000 triathletes descend upon the area with their wetsuits that have been in other bodies of water is a potential disaster for a water body like this. So, in order to secure a permit for this race, the race organizers have come up with a plan that requires everybody to decontaminate their wetsuits before entering the water on race day. And what that entails is on Saturday, you will drive out to the Lake Kauai recreation area. You'll come down Avenue 58. You'll enter into this area here. And I will warn you, do this early in the day. Do not put this off till late in the day, because what happens is this is a 2-lane road. Parking requires people to kind of like park in, and then getting out means they have to back into this road. So you can imagine that it causes a lot of stop and go traffic. And by the end of the day, last year, there was traffic all the way down Avenue 58, and it took people a long time to check in. So go earlier in the day. That's my secret tip for you. As soon as you can check in your wetsuit and bike, do so, and then head over to T2 to drop off your run gear. At any rate, you need to go in on some point on Saturday with whatever you are going to be swimming with. Wetsuit for sure. If you're planning on wearing neoprene booties, you need to bring those. If you're planning on wearing a neoprene cap, you need to bring that. Whatever enters the water on your body that is made of neoprene must be brought to transition on Saturday to be decontaminated. And the decontamination process is super easy. You and a whole bunch of your new friends are going to stand around this large temporary kind of kiddie pool that's filled with water that has some bleach in it. Not enough bleach to cause any damage to any of your neoprene items, but enough to cause a lot of damage to any invasive mollusk larvae that might be on your wetsuit. And so you're going to basically, all together with your friends, you're going to dunk your neoprene items, completely submerge them in the water, hold them there for a count of, I believe, 15 seconds. You're then going to remove them, and you're going to bring your neoprene items to a person who's going to tag them as having been decontaminated, and you will hang them in a secure area where they will stay to dry overnight. You cannot bring them back with you home. You must leave them there. The entire process is incredibly well run, very seamless, very easy to follow. Just be sure that you bring all of these things with you on Saturday to transition along with your bike. Your bike will stay in this transition area. It's a little bit bigger than what I'm drawing, but basically this is where the racks are. Your bike will be put in this area. Your wetsuits are placed in a sort of corral that's over here. And so on race morning, what happens is the shuttles come from Indian Wells, and the shuttles will drop you off right here. You then get off the shuttle, you walk to the corral to get your neoprene items, wetsuit, booties, and cap if you had them. You grab those things, and then you walk to transition, you enter transition, and then you do all of the usual things you do on race morning with your bike. I'm going to stop for a second just to see if there are any questions about the pre-race logistics, because I know that was a lot that I kind of threw at you.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, thanks. We have someone asking, what would the ideal race day logistics look like for family and friends who are coming to watch and support?
I'm going to need Ryan's help on this because I've only ever come there by myself. I know that people have brought family with them on the shuttles. Now, the shuttles at first are reserved for racers, but after a certain time, they will open up to spectators. The problem with bringing spectators to the race on the shuttles is that they're going to be stuck there because the bikers go on the roads that the shuttles need to take to get back. And so when I've gone with family or friends, I have never brought them to the swim start. I have told them just to wait at transition because at T2, because getting to the swim is easy, but getting back from the swim is difficult. Ryan, do you want to add to that?
I would agree. It's challenging. Bike course, the swim course has to be complete. The last athlete has to be out of T1 before we allow buses to come back into the lake area to pick up anyone who's gotten a ride into Lake Kauai. So there's a time element there for sure. Every athlete has their allotted time to swim the course and get out of transition. We're not going to let any buses, get even close to the course during that window. There's just too logistically challenging. So if you do get a ride down there, your next best plan is to go straight to T2 and look for your athlete or family member, anyone you're with participating in the race, to come in from the bike course and transition into run course. That's really the only game we have for the lake. And by the time you get back to T2, a good portion of the bike course is probably going to be done.
Any other questions, Juliet, right now?
No other questions right now. Thanks.
Okay. Then let's continue to
one other thing, Jeff.
Yeah.
You mentioned riding at the Indian Wells Garden Tennis Center, checking out your bike, checking out your things. A lot of athletes like to do that when they drop off their bike here, for this matter, or this point at T1. Again, due to the traffic and athlete flow coming in on Saturday, it's not a good idea to do it there either, for sure. I just wanted to bring that up. We have a lot of athletes who try, and it creates a bigger element of traffic or delays, and it's not very safe as well.
Yeah, you definitely want to avoid. I happened to rent a place that was right adjacent to the tennis center, and so I was able to go early in the morning. But yeah, once athletes start coming in, especially on Saturday, it's going to be not advisable. That's for sure. All right, well, let's move on to the swim. So race morning arrives. You have done what we've talked about in terms of getting there by shuttle. You have gone to pick up your neoprene items. You have gone through transition to set up your bike, and it's time for the swim. And so I've overlaid the map of the swim from the Ironman website onto Lake Kauai. I'm very excited that I was actually saying that pretty close to right. And you can see that because of the configuration of the lake and because of the size of the lake, it's not possible to do a traditional kind of swim setup. You can't do an out and back, you can't do a rectangle or a triangle or the usual thing. Instead, we have a very interesting V shape for this swim, which actually makes it, I think, personally, a much more kind of mentally manageable. Many times you show up for the swim at these events and you look out at what, like if you're in the pool and you're swimming 1900 meters, you think to yourself, oh, that wasn't so bad. But then when you actually go out and you see 1,000 meters laid out ahead of you and then 1,000 meters coming back, it just seems so daunting. Well, none of the legs of this swim are any more than, I think, 500 meters. I think this is like a 500-meter stretch. So you're only looking at about 500 meters, and it just looks so much easier. So mentally, psychologically, this is a really nice configuration. The only sort of thing to remember is that there are multiple turns. So there's a right turn after about 500 meters, and you have a 50-meter swim and then another right turn. You will come through there. It shows one buoy, but there's actually two buoys here, and you're going to swim between two buoys to make a slight left before you then move on to this leg. And you will note I've placed the sun here because this is where the sun is rising, and the sun is low to the horizon and very, very bright. And so when you are swimming this leg, it's the only leg where sighting is a problem. You're swimming directly into the sun. It's short, but it is definitely, it's like not easy. So follow the feet in front of you. You will eventually see the buoys as you go by them, but it is the one leg of the swim that is challenging because the sun is right in front of you. But then once you make that right-hand turn, that's it. The sighting becomes easy again. It's another, I want to say 75 meters or so, and then a right-hand turn, and you can see the arch as you then make your way over to the finish. For those of you who have never done a 70.3, if you are new to an Ironman type of event, you may be familiar. In the old days, we used to do mass starts or even age group starts. That is no longer the case. Now, all Ironman events use a self-seeded start where people line themselves up based on their anticipated finish time. So if you are a 40-minute half Ironman swim time, you would look for the person who is lined up along the beach holding the sign that says 40 to 43 minutes or 40 to 45, whatever it is, and you would put yourself near that person with that sign. And what you'll see is on race morning, about a half an hour before, this is not Indian Wells. This is actually a slide from Coeur d'Alene, but Indian Wells looks very, very similar to this. The corral will be along the beach, and it will end with an arch, and there will be 4 little lanes, and so 4 people will start at a time. The most important part about this working successfully is that people be honest about their anticipated swim times. Too often, people who are worried about finishing the swim try to put themselves up at the front thinking that, oh, I'm going to give myself more time to complete the swim. The reality is everybody gets exactly the same amount of time. From the moment you cross the timing mat at the bottom of these little laneways to the moment you exit the water, you have 1 hour and 10 minutes. It doesn't matter if you start here. It doesn't matter if you start at the back. You have 1 hour and 10 minutes from the moment you start your swim. So putting yourself in the wrong part of this corral is really not gaining you any benefit, and in fact is really only asking for misadventure. Because if you are a slower swimmer and you put yourself up amongst the faster swimmers, you're inviting a lot of contact as people swim over you, swim around you, encounter you in ways that you probably aren't going to be comfortable with. So honestly, just be modest, give yourself a good assessment of what your swim time is going to be. And if you don't know how to do that, if you're not sure what your swim time is going to be because this is your first race, my suggestion is to do a 1,000 yard or 1,000 meter time trial in your pool. Just go out and swim 1,000. That will give you an estimate of your 100 meter or 100 yard time. Multiply that by the total distance, 1,900 meters, or I think it's 2,100 yards, something like that. And then you will have a guesstimate of what your anticipated race time is going to be. It's okay to seed yourself a little bit slower, knowing that in a race you will always be a little bit faster. Better to put yourself a little bit slower than too fast, because putting yourself too fast is, again, just inviting more trouble. But be honest, put yourself in the right place. You have 1 hour and 10 minutes, and I'm quite convinced you will have no problems finishing. One thing I do want to point out is that by the time you get to the swim start, you probably will have eaten your breakfast 3 or 4 hours earlier. Everybody's up at about 3 or 4 a.m. for this race. And so you eat your breakfast and then you do all the things you need to do. And by the time you're racing, it's 7. So it's been quite a long time since you had any food. So I always tell people, bring some calories with you for the start of the race, gel pack of chews, something like that. Just have that about 15 to 20 minutes before the race, and that'll be enough to get you through the swim and give you that little bit of boost to help you get going. So this is a view from the start of Lake Kauai. It is a magnificent swim. It is one of the prettiest swims that I have ever done, and it is one that I know you will enjoy. However, as I know is a frequent topic of discussion, the water, it's a little brisk. That is always something that causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of concern amongst people who are coming to this race, especially if they're coming for the first time. I'm not going to lie. This isn't going to be a hot tub experience. If you have done races in the open ocean, where, like in Hawaii, for example, where wetsuits aren't allowed because it's so warm, it's not that. But at the same time, all of the rumors you've heard, it's not that bad either. You're not going to freeze. You're not going to be blue when you come out of the water. It's really not nearly that bad. With all that said, you do have to wear the right clothing. You don't want to show up in just a swimsuit. You definitely want to be wearing some neoprene. And in fact, if the water is the usual temperature it is, a wetsuit will be mandatory. So let's just answer the question that everybody has, which is how cold is water going to be and what do I wear? Traditionally, at this time of year, Lake Kauai can run between 58 and 65 degrees, although historically for this race, the temperature has been 59 or 60, which is chilly, but it's not ridiculous. Having done races in water that's 55, 53, 59, 60, although it doesn't sound like it's that much warmer, it's actually a lot more comfortable. With that said, the rules of Ironman stipulate that not only is this a guaranteed wetsuit legal race, but it's a actually wetsuit mandatory race most years. Now, last year the water was a little bit warmer. Last year, I think the water was around 63, 64, which was a little unusual. But again, those 3 or 4 degrees are noticeable. Still, if the water is its usual temperature, then you will see from the rule book of Ironman that wetsuits are mandatory anytime the water is below 60.8 degrees or 16 degrees Celsius. You can use neoprene booties if the water temperature is below 65, and it just about always is. So if that is a concern, if you're worried about your feet, then by all means. Gloves, however, are called out specifically as illegal equipment, and so gloves will not be allowed. Honestly, again, it's brisk, but it's not awful. And after about a couple of 100 meters, it's really, really not that bad. It's the first couple of 100 meters. Now, there's no place to have a practice swim in Lake Kauai, but what they do set up is they set up a little roped off area along the beach where the start corrals are. So before you get into that start corral, you can actually get into this little roped off area. You can't swim, but you can at least immerse yourself in the water just to get past that initial kind of shock of, oh my gosh, it's cold. And once you get past that, oh my gosh, it's cold, you actually are like, you know what, that's not quite so bad. And I promise you, it really isn't. So the next question that a lot of people have is, should I wear a thermal wetsuit? So wetsuits come in all kinds of flavors and varieties, but the biggest distinction between a thermal wetsuit and a regular wetsuit, they're exactly the same. The neoprene is the same, the construction is the same, but a thermal wetsuit has the addition of a thermal lining. It's usually some kind of like polyester blend, almost like a fleece lining in the wetsuit, and it's designed basically just to help retain heat. This is not a question I can answer broadly. This is a very individual type of question. And I think it really depends on each person. How tolerant are you of being cold? Because listen, you're not going to be freezing, but you will be chilled. And then how long are you going to be in the water? If someone's going to be in the water for a particularly long time, if your swim is an hour and 10 minutes, then maybe a thermal wetsuit is not a bad idea. But if you're a swimmer who's going to be in the water for 30 minutes, I think a thermal wetsuit is excessive. And I say this from experience. The first time I raced there, I wore a thermal wetsuit, and you are generating a fair amount of heat when you swim. So for the first couple of 100 meters, it feels cold. It feels bracing. But after a couple of 100 meters, the heat that you're generating is being retained by your neoprene wetsuit. And I actually felt comfortable pretty quickly. And I swim in about 32, 33 minutes. And I will tell you that when I wore my thermal wetsuit, after a third of the swim, I was too hot. I was overheated, and the next time I went back, and I actually have raced it 2 subsequent times, I wore a regular wetsuit, and I was very happy. I wore a neoprene cap each time, and I have no insulation, so for me a neoprene cap made sense, but I think a thermal wetsuit is excessive for most people. However, again, a very individual decision. Whatever you decide, that wetsuit is what you have to check in on Saturday. Don't bring a second wetsuit on Sunday because you will not be allowed to use it. Whatever you've done, you've gotten through that swim, you've made the effort, and look, you're done. You can be coming out, you can be running up this little sandy area, you're going to get onto some grassy area where they have some little kiddie pools that you can wash your feet off of, and then it's into transition. And before I move forward, are there any questions on the swim?
None that have been listed in the Q&A. Thanks, Jeff.
And then I will motor along and we will get to the first of the transitions. Now, this is a big race, and that means it has a very large transition. But T1 is compact. It's a pretty small area to have all these bikes. And so don't forget it's a race. And a lot of people sort of shortchange the importance of transitions, but the reality is whether or not you're there to win or just to complete. The fact is transition counts towards your overall time. And if you're one of those people who is thinking, well, I'm just here to make the cutoffs, well, transitions count. So being as fast as you can during transitions just gives you more time towards your cutoffs later. So it behooves everybody to learn how to be fast in transition. Be as quick as you can while still being safe. And one of the easiest ways to be quick in transition is by taking a few moments on Saturday when you drop off your bike to really scope out the best path from the swim exit to your bike, from your bike to the exit to get going on the bike course. A couple things about this transition. Number one, you're going to come in with your wetsuit on. You're going to strip your wetsuit off at your bike, and you're going to have a bag there, a blue bag that had your bike gear. Your bike gear is going to come out of that blue bag. You are allowed to clip shoes into pedals if that's something you do regularly. But the rest of your bike gear is going to be in this blue bag. You're going to take it out of the blue bag. You're going to take your wetsuit. You're going to take whatever else you have on the swim. And you're going to put it into that blue bag. You're going to tie it up tight, and you're going to leave that bag at your spot when you leave with your bike. And those bags are going to be collected and transported to the finish at the end of the day. Once you get to the start of the bike course, you need to know that the bike course starts. You're going to have to run up a little bit of a hill, and then the bike course starts with another little bit of a hill and then a left-hand turn. So if you're the kind of person who does put their shoes in the pedals, you got to be in an easy gear, and you got to be aware you're probably not going to get your feet into those shoes before you have to navigate that little hill and that little turn. So don't put your shoes in the pedals if that's not something you're very comfortable with. Do a lot of practice of transitions in advance. That's the best way to get quick at them, and make sure that in transition, you're doing the absolute bare minimum. That means you're not there to socialize. You're not there to have a meal. You're not there to start putting on sunscreen. You put on sunscreen before the race, you eat while you're on the bike, and you socialize after the race. And now you're out on the bike course. And this is a bike course that is really enjoyable. It's rolling, it's fast. It's one of the flatter bike courses. 528 feet of elevation gain is pretty flat. Most 70.3 courses will comprise over 1,500 feet of climbing. So if you're doing this race, you are in for a treat. It's nice and flat. There is a quick kind of like jaunt, turn, curvy sort of stretch coming out of the recreation area. But after that, it's pretty darn straight. You have a series of straights with 90-degree turns that then bring you to other long straightaways. And a lot of these are kind of out and back straightaways. There is a punchy little climb just before this turnaround around mile 10. You could see that right here. It's very visible. It doesn't surprise you. You can see it as you're coming up to it, and easy to get into the right gear. It's a nice kind of break from being an aero. You get out, you stretch your back, you pull up to that U-turn, you make the U-turn, and then you come flying down that hill, and you get a good amount of speed all the way down this long straightaway. The road surfaces on this course, it's chip seal. It is rural, so the quality of the road isn't always fantastic. It's usually pretty good, though. But I will say it is a course that generally is better run with lower tire pressure. So if you're the kind of person who's running like 100 or 110 psi, you're not going to enjoy this course. If you're running 90, 80 psi, you're going to be much happier. It's going to make the course much smoother, more comfortable, and you will have an easier time navigating it. Once you get through this last sort of U-turn at about mile 26, you will see that the course then begins to slowly do all of its elevation gain. All of the elevation gain of this race, except for that little punchy hill, all of the elevation gain of this race comes after about 30 miles. And it's the entire last half of the race where you are gaining the 528 feet. Now, it's not a lot. It's 26 miles, 528 feet, but there's the added benefit that the winds tend to come from this direction. So from the moment you make that last turnaround, you will be riding, for the most part, into some degree of a headwind. It's usually not a strong headwind, but it's there. And you have this kind of continuous, gradual grade that you're going to be dealing with. It's not dramatic, of course, but it adds up. getting in nutrition because it is dry and it is warm, and you take in your nutrition and hydration according to the plan that you have before the race. And when you make that turnaround, just know that the effort coming back for the last half is going to be higher than it was for the first half. So measure your effort to accommodate for that. Once you get to about mile 35, you enter the race course. And the race course is, to my knowledge, as I said earlier, I think the only one on the Ironman circuit, and it's a lot of fun. It looks very convoluted, and just looking at the map, it is. But when you're actually riding on it, it's not, because the roads are, I mean, you're riding on this race course, basically. It's very, very wide, and you just follow everybody ahead of you, follow the signs. It's super easy to navigate. And even this U-turn over here and this U-turn over here, because the race course is so wide, it's so easy to make these U-turns at speed. And you will see it's just a super fun experience, and makes for easily some of the best race photos ever. I would say that the 3 times I've done this race, I've gotten my 3 best pictures from finisher pics. And I'll show you that on the next slide. But once you come out of there, you're at around mile 40, and you can see this is really where it starts. This looks dramatic, but just remember, you're talking about, negative 150 feet below sea level to finishing at about 150. So you're talking about 300 feet of elevation gain over 16 miles. So not very much, but it is there. You will notice it. And but once you come out of the racetrack, you're in the home stretch, so you can start thinking about the run. As I said, really pretty course. You can be riding past some amazing, just like rural settings, the palm trees and everything else. And then once you get on the race course, make sure you stay narrow, because you get these awesome pictures. And I have 3 years worth of like this kind of picture, and all of them are great. So it's really nice to see. Once you finish the bike course, you are back to transition, and I'll just stop for a second and see if there's any questions.
Cool pics. No questions. Thanks.
Let's just look at them one more time. All right. Same slide for the transition, because it's kind of the same deal. It's a big race. It's a big transition. I will say that navigating T2 is much easier than navigating T1, because it's in a much bigger area. So again, Saturday, when you drop off your run gear, scope it out. Make sure you understand exactly where you're coming from, where the entrance is for bike in, that you're going to be running on this grass surface, and you're going to be going to which rack is yours, which side of the rack is yours. And then once you get there, you put your bike on the rack, untie that bag, get everything out of the bag. You can leave your bike stuff out of the bag. It doesn't have to go into the bag. And then off you go. Practice that bike to run transition, and then again, doing the bare minimum. This is not the time to be doing any of those same things: socializing, eating, doing, sunscreen, all that stuff. You can actually grab some sunscreen on the way out. There are volunteers that will have sunscreen that you can put on there. So do everything you can while you're in motion. Do as little as possible standing still. And once you leave, you're on to the run course. I'm not going to lie, this is not the easiest run course. This is and listen, after a bike course that was pretty easy, it's time to get serious, because the run course is really the challenging part of this race. It's challenging for a number of reasons. I think the first is because you usually get onto the run course when the day is starting to get warm. We're not talking, summer desert heat or anything, but it's still going to be probably low 80s, maybe mid 80s by the time you start running. And you are running on a completely wide open, there's no shade. It's just you're running on a golf course. And the running on the golf course is part of the issue that makes it somewhat difficult. Coming out of transition, you're going to go around the tennis center the way I showed on that first slide where I drew it. And then you're going to turn onto Miles Avenue. This section of the course is incredibly well supported. There are just hundreds of people out there, and they will be there the whole day. And the beauty of this is that you get to encounter this 4 times. You will run out, you will run back, you will run out, and you will run back. And the energy that you get from these crowds is tremendous. So it's a really, really great vibe. And you encounter that really from the moment you get onto Miles Avenue here. It's just wall to wall people all the way back. And it really makes for an awesome experience. So if you haven't experienced that before, get ready. You're in for a real treat. This section here is it's probably the most challenging hill you deal with, and you're going to deal with it 4 times. So it's here. No, sorry, I apologize. It's here, and then it's here. You're going to counter it twice, and you're going to counter it each time you go up because you're running down it on the way out, and then you're running up it on the way back. And so it's at the end of the first loop, and it's at the end of the second loop, and it's it's not a huge hill. It's not terribly steep, but when you're tired and when you've been running for a while, it's you notice it. So when you run down this hill the first time as you're leaving, just pay attention because you will remember, okay, I have to come back up this. So you definitely want to measure your effort. The reason I say this course is difficult is because the golf course itself. You could see it's just continuously turning on itself. You never really have any long straightaways once you're off of Miles Avenue, and you're running on different surfaces. You're usually running on the cart path, which is generally a good asphalt, but sometimes becomes concrete. Sometimes you're running on grass. Sometimes you actually have to run through a couple of sandy areas. I think there's only 2 of them. And when you do run through those sandy areas, the footing gets a little loose, so you definitely want to just take your time going through those. But the rest of the run is very enjoyable because it's beautiful. You are constantly seeing views of the mountains to the west. You are running through a very beautiful golf course, and you're constantly seeing other runners because you could see that you are continuously running in close proximity to where runners are going in the other direction. So you are always seeing other people running. And the aid stations come up very quickly because even though there's only 3 of them, you just constantly hear them and you're constantly coming across them. So the golf course, as difficult it is as part of this run, it actually is quite enjoyable because of the scenery, because of the fact that you're constantly seeing runners, and it makes for a pretty decent run. However, it is deceptively difficult. So 420 feet, that's a reasonable amount of elevation gain for a half Ironman. Again, only 2 kind of real hills. The rest of it is just in a constant up and down. And the reason I say it's difficult is because you're just constantly rolling up and down on this cart path, and you're just constantly having to make these U-turns, which all in all adds up to a somewhat difficult course. So my best advice for people doing this is keep fueling, keep hydrating, use those aid stations to cool down, water, ice, do whatever you need to make sure you stay cool. Make sure you're getting electrolytes with your solution. There's Mortal hydration on the course. So it's got a lot of salt in it. You don't need to carry any salt. You'll get more than enough from Mortal if that's something you're looking for. Mortal should be something you try before you use it in a race, so just make sure it agrees with you. And just measure your effort on that first lap, because as you do that first lap, you want to kind of get a feel for what it's like in this golf course. And then on the second lap, you can give it a little more gusto to try and improve your pace and do what everybody in triathlon tries so hard to do, but often is unsuccessful at, and that's a negative split. As I said, it's a really beautiful course. You will be just running through some really nice vistas, most of the time on this very nice asphalt surface. And again, makes for some good finisher picks at the end of the day. My last piece of advice for everybody is that as you're getting back to the tennis center and you're going through those crowds, really soak it up, really enjoy yourself, and really take those last mile or so to really embrace what you've done. You've worked very hard. You're accomplishing something that a very small percentage of people actually do. And when you get to that finish line, don't be the person who's looking down at their watch, stopping their Garmin. Be the person who finishes with a big smile on their face and really savors their finish. Don't look like this guy who looks like he got punched in the gut and had a bad day. You want to be happy. You want to, as much as possible, really savor the day, savor the moment, and remember what it's for. You're living life to the absolute max. You've worked really hard for this moment, and in return, you're going to get this awesome medal. I have to say, I mean, last year's medal was nice, but this one is like, this is a whole new level. So kudos to the race organizers for coming up with such a nice medal this year. That's what I've got for you. I hope that this was helpful. I am more than happy to take your questions offline as well. Juliet will make a link available where you can schedule a time to reach out to her or to me, and we can talk to you privately. And I hope, as I said, this was useful to everyone. If you have any other questions, please let me know while Ryan and I are here.
Thanks so much, Jeff. That was great. Yes, the information on contacting Jeff directly, as well as scheduling a free consult if you want one, is in the Q&A to your right-hand side of your screen. Before we let you guys go, does anyone have any questions, any last-minute questions? There wasn't a whole lot of activity in the chat today, but that was probably because Jeff's presentation was so thorough.
I can only hope.
Yeah, right. All right, cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Ryan. That was great to have your help. And thanks again, Jeff. And everybody, have a terrific time at this race. It's a great end of season race. It's a great way to cap off your season, particularly if you're in North America, before we all head inside. And so have a great time down there that weekend. And hope to see you again. Thanks so much.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to see some faces.
All right, Ryan, I think you have to end the meeting because I think you're the only one with that button.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Yep.
Take care, Jeff.
Okay, bye now.